Hi everyone, it's Ash from FPL Hints, back with some more preseason FPL content. As always, if you're able to like, share, and subscribe, that will be greatly appreciated. Or if you want to buy me a coffee, the link is pinned under this video. Right then, it's that time of the year when I make an attempt to predict Fabio Borges' FPL team. For those that have followed my content from the past 2 years, I made an attempt to predict his transfers 2 years ago. I then attempted to predict his entire team last year, just before game week 1. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing again. And before I get into it, just a reminder on who Fabio Borges is. One of the highest ranked FPL managers across multiple leaderboards. And one of the reasons he's been able to do that is because he's got 8 consecutive top 5k finishes in FPL. And he's had a slight dip over the past 2 seasons, but he's still up there among the very best and is a source of emulation for thousands of FPL managers. So just to show his past history there as well, from the 2014-15 season, and you can see he's got a best overall rank of 95th during the 18-19 season. You can see the streak of top 5k ranks right there. He hit a wall somewhat during the 22-23 season with a 33k rank, which very respectable. I'd be very pleased with that, but no doubt for someone of his standards, it's something that was a slight setback. And then 23-24 season, I would have loved a 27k rank, but again, marginal improvement, but hopefully he'll be back up to speed with another top 5k rank for the 24-25 season. Just to further contextualize the kind of manager he is as well, he's known for playing FPL in a very specific way. And one of his hallmarks, as you can see on screen there from the 23-24 season, is the lack of transfers. You can see 37 transfers in 38 game weeks, which talks about his patience and also his gameplay when it comes to FPL. You can see healthy team value towards the end of the season as well. And ultimately, with the way that he plays, it's very similar to many other elite FPL managers. And I'm going to come on to the kind of players that he picked last season as well and how that aligns with other picks. But he's not afraid to take a risk here and there as well, especially with captaincy. But just to give you an indication on the kind of players he picks, this is a graphic I saw on FPLX, which was produced by FPL Focal from 2 years ago. And whilst the data itself is out of date, you get a good indication on the kind of players that Fabio Borges is interested in. So on the goalkeeping side, those goalkeepers that he's got are 4.5 goalkeepers, and he loves at least one premium defender, a premium for midfielder as well. And of course, during this season, the one before Haaland, there wasn't really a premium striker, as it were. So he really focused his funds across midfield as well to have a very balanced team. But it gives a good indication on the direction of travel that he's had previously. And I've also got an indication on the kind of team that he had last season as well. So last season, which I almost predicted spot on, 4 out of 5 of his defense I got right, 4 out of 5 for the midfield I got right as well. And there's a link in the description below that shows you what the outcomes were. And he had Haaland, of course, as well. But when I say he likes being different as well, like obviously you can predict him on certain things, but Osula, that forward pick, literally came out of nowhere. I suspected he was going to have a very cheap budget third forward, and in this case it was Osula. I had no idea who that was at that time. Again, 2 4.0 defenders, so they could unlock funds elsewhere across the pitch. So I had a very good indication on the kind of players he would pick and was fairly spot on with those picks. And as the team progressed during last season, this is like at the halfway point again, still got that 4.5 goalkeeper. In this case, he's got Trent as his premium defender with Gusto and Pedro Porro propping him up. So he likes those attacking defense options. And then in this case, he's got Salah, and Haaland was injured at this time. So he then shifted his team accordingly. But he did have Haaland and Salah for the opening game week of 23-24. But what's different here is, and it'll be harder for me for the prediction that I'm going to do, that pricing has increased. So he'll have to find balance accordingly. And I've got an idea on what he probably will do. So you can see he's got Dom Solanke there as well, and very strong bench options. So he demonstrated that early on he's happy to be cheap with the bench, but also he can spread funds. But again, the unique situation here was Haaland was injured, so he could spread funds accordingly. And this was his end of season team from 23-24. You can see Pedro Porro there with Gabriel and Robertson. So it's not a super cheap budget defense, but I feel he might have to effectively maneuver in a certain way for the 24-25 season with perhaps cheaper budget options than he had in the past. And then very strong midfield. But again, last season, Palmer was 5 million at his starting price. And then obviously the price went up. So it'll be interesting to see if I can squeeze him in as well. I doubt that will be the case. And then onto the bench here, got Edison, surprisingly, as a goalkeeper. So I did talk about his focus on 4.5 goalkeepers. It's probably one of the few drafts I've seen of his where he's got a goalkeeper that's more than 4.5 million. And with Edison, in this case, I think he might have had a double game week, so he got him in perhaps on a wild card. And then you got Byrne, Webster, and Gordon as well. So clearly, the players that offer really good points per million and offer value are always on his radar. The attacking defenders for sure as well. And he finished the season without Mohamed Salah. I think Salah didn't have a double game week perhaps, so he perhaps shifted his team accordingly. But the other thing I wanted to show you, if I can just get this on screen here as well, this is a screenshot I saw on FPLX, which at a point last season showed what players every elite FPL manager picked. So Fabio Borges is right up there at the top, followed by Finn Solly, who's Norwegian, not Finnish. And you've got many other legendary managers under them as well. And you can see, generally speaking, they do tend to pick almost the same players. He doesn't necessarily deviate massively from the established template. I don't want to call it like a rogue pick, but like he will have that maverick pick as well. And with captaincy, although I have advocated for captain EO, be safe, when it comes to Fabio Borges, he does take risks with captaincy as well. The other thing I wanted to give an indication on, which I think provides clues on who he will pick and who the elite managers will pick, is effectively this metric, which is, it's called the top 1% data from FPL.team. It's freely available. Now with this, it's basically what the engaged managers are picking at this moment in time in terms of players, and it's different to the FPL ownership. I've got a separate video on that. I'll put a link in the description below. You can see here, Henderson has very high ownership, as does Flecken. And then you look at the players on official FPL, and these players will have considerably less ownership. So you can see that the elite managers and the engaged managers will go for a budget goalkeeper, and they've got really good options in the 4.5 range. And you can see that in this instance, Henderson, Fleck, and Valdemarsson, again, I've got no doubt they're picking him as a option so that if Flecken was injured, then they'd obviously have another goalkeeper, so that there isn't a need to make a goalkeeping transfer, as it were. And another one here, you've got Matthews, 2.9%. Now, there's talk of Johnston being put on the transfer list for Crystal Palace. So Matthews at 4.0 will most likely be the sub goalkeeper for Crystal Palace. So I'm expecting that ownership to also shoot up as well. So some might go for Fleck and Valdemarsson, others might go for Henderson and Matthews. But I feel that with the Brentford option, there is that peace of mind that they at least may not necessarily go for the other options. So goalkeeping front, you can see budget goalkeepers seems like the direction of travel. Onto the defenders, we talked about the importance of having at least one premium defender, and it seems like a tight squeeze this year, with perhaps some going for Gvardiol, some going for Trent, but some might just actually may not go for either and focus on a budget defence, go for Porro perhaps as a quote-unquote premium defender. Onto the midfielders, you can see there's a lot of this talk of, a no Salah draft for many on FPLX. Well, look at that. Mohamed Salah, 62%, Eze, 60%. A lot of these players, Gordon, 46%. These percentages are obviously skewed on official FPL because of the way that auto select works and a lot of casual managers. You've got Jota, 27%. I don't think he's that high on official FPL at the moment. And then look at the forwards ownership for this engaged percentages. Isak, pretty much 100%. So I think that further validates that not only is he a popular pick for engaged managers, again, they're just a notch below the elite managers. It gives an indication that even Fabio Borges would certainly consider him because of the value that he offers in Newcastle's generous run of games. So I'm going to get straight into it now, and I'm going to justify each of my picks for the 24-25 season ahead of game week 1 for predicting Fabio Borges. And whilst I do that, I'll make a specific prediction and then I'll bring the players in. So the first prediction that I'm going to make is that Fabio Borges will definitely pick a 4.5 goalkeeper and a 4.0 goalkeeper for game week 1. It's something that he's not been shy of doing in the past, but that is prediction 1, that 4.5 goalie, 4.0 goalie. I'm going to go straight to Brentford. He does have some sort of affinity with Brentford from what I can gather. And in fact, I'll just show it here as well, that there we go. He always seems to select Brentford as his favourite team there. So there he is with his team ID, which is 4719275. Again, I'll put a link of that in the description below as well. I think it will definitely be the Flecken, Valder, Marson combination. So those are the 2 picks that I'm bringing in as part of prediction 1. Again, may not pick them. He might actually go for other budget options, but as part of my prediction, it'll be a 4.5 and a 4.0 goalkeeper. On to prediction 2, I think he's only going to have one midfielder that is 10 million or more. And in this instance, I'm going to pick Mohamed Salah. I think that he will recognise the value in Mohamed Salah and the opening run of games and wanting to hit the ground running after last year's disappointment. So in comes Mohamed Salah, as I believe he'll be the only 10 million plus midfielder for Fabio Borges for game week 1. I also think, apart from Mohamed Salah, he is going to do the Salah and Haaland combination. So prediction number 2, he is going to have them both in his starting 11 for game week 1. So there we go. In they both come. And again, that means that funds need to be balanced accordingly. I think Fabio Borges will definitely pick a Portuguese player, and he's picked Bruno Fernandes in the past. 8.5 million last season, 8.5 million this season. But I think you'll see value in Liverpool's Diogo Jota, who is 7.5 million, fit and ready to go for game week 1. So in he comes as part of a Liverpool double up here with Mohamed Salah. On to prediction number 5 now for Fabio Borges's FPL team for game week 1. I think he's going to have a reasonable sub 1, someone who he could potentially start as well for certain game weeks. And he very rarely goes for a 4.5 million forward, and there aren't really many 4.5 million forwards in the game. But I think he's going to go for João Pedro at 5.5 million, someone who he can start in certain game weeks and also can be a sub 1 as and when required. Prediction number 6, fairly straightforward. He's going to go for Isak with the engaged managers metric, like I showed you, practically 100% owned. Isak offers exceptional value for money and a generous run of opening games. So that will complete the forward lineup there of my predicted team for Fabio Borges' strike force of Pedro, Haaland and Isak. Prediction number 7, he's going to have at least 2 Newcastle United players in his team. And in my illustration, the additional player is going to be Gordon. So in he comes. So at least 2 Newcastle players. In my iteration, I'm going to potentially push it to 3, but the prediction is he'll have 2 more Newcastle United players. Prediction number 8. I'm convinced that just due to the way the pricing has worked this season and it's really hard to fit players in, he's definitely going to pick 2 4.0 defenders. And he won't start them, but there'll be like a sub 2, sub 3 option. So one of them will definitely be Barco. And the other player I think you'll see value in is Ben Johnson as a sub 3 due to the potential out of position option there at Ipswich. So fairly straightforward there. 2 4.0 defenders, but they will not be starters for him. Prediction number 9. He will have at least 2 defenders who are 5.0 or more. And I've seen a lot of managers on FPLX who've struggled to get more than one in. But I think in this instance, he will definitely get 2 or more 5.0 plus defenders. One of them, and there was a clue actually towards last season, as I showed you earlier on in this video, that he enjoyed picking Pedro Porro, who is now 5.5 million. I think Pedro Porro will be one of those defenders who has also got high ownership on official FPL and among the engaged managers. So in he comes as a defensive option for him, who isn't like in the cheap category. And I think the other defender, which I think is owned by considerably less players, I'm going to go to Crystal Palace now, and he's 5.0 million, less than 5% owned. I think you'll see value in Daniel Munoz. So in he comes as the other defensive option. So that prediction, the other prediction that I said would happen in this video is that you have 2 or more 5.0 million pound defenders, and 5.5 for Pedro Porro and 5.0 million for Munoz. On to the next prediction. I will be shocked if he had even one Arsenal player. In my illustration, he will have 0. So no Arsenal players will make the cut, unfortunately, in this instance. And on to my next prediction. He will find the extra 0.5 million to get Eze in, but if he can't, he'll get Nkunku into his team. So I'm going to get Eze in my team as well. There we go. So Eze makes the cut as well. And that leaves me with 2 spots to fill, 9.5 million in the bank. I think that the other player he's going to pick, I talked about Newcastle, will be at least 2 or more. So the final missing piece for the Newcastle triple up here, I think it's going to be Dan Burn. Now, there were questions about X-Min's issues with Dan Burn, but then I understand Newcastle have a couple of defensive injuries, so Burn will almost likely start at least those opening game weeks. So in he comes. And there is talk that when Gahey comes in, that he'll be an X-Min's issue, or he could be pushed in a different position potentially. But the Gahey transfer isn't confirmed at the time of recording. There's also, of course, other options for Newcastle. If I just show you on the defensive front as well, that he could potentially consider at 4.5 million. You've got Lewis Hall, but might be some X-Min's issues there, Livramento as well. But because of the durability of Dan Burn, I think that he will probably get the nod. Again, it's a bit of a harder one. I'm not going all in with that. He could literally pick any 4.5 million pound defender, even a non-Newcastle one. But just to make this fit, I think he will probably see value in a 4.5 million pound defender. But I'm just picking Dan Burn in this iteration. That leaves me with 5 million in the bank and 1 slot to fill now. And I think that for my final piece of this jigsaw, I'm going to go to Brentford. We talked about his affinity with Brentford. We talked about his affinity with Portugal as well, because he's Portuguese. He's going to look at this guy, Fabio Carvalho, 5.0 million. He's absolutely going to get him into his team. Offers exceptional value and rotates remarkably well with João Pedro as well. So I think that will be a fairly straightforward pick for him. And that, just want to show you, has maxed out the budget there and completes my predicted lineup for Fabio Borges for his Game Week 1 team for the 24-25 season. And I'm also going to give you 5 bonus players that I think I might have missed out on that I've got no doubt he'll definitely want. One of them I've mentioned is Nkunku. He'll try and make him work if he can. The other player, if he does get entry into the Arsenal attack, would be Kai Havertz. I don't think he'll have an Arsenal defender, despite the Arsenal defenders being very highly owned. Other defender he absolutely loves is Trent Alexander-Arnold, but if he can't get Trent, he's going to go for Pedro Porro, as I've shown you in my draft. Dom Solanke at Spurs, I think he offers exceptional value, and if he can somehow make it work with a 3-4-3 formation and bump up Pedro Porro, then no doubt Dom Solanke will come in for Fabio Borges. And last but not least, the other player I mentioned was Bruno Fernandes. He absolutely seems to have an affinity for him as well, his Portuguese counterpart. So I think he is the other player that he will definitely consider in his team. So I want to do my famous super zoom in for my Fabio Borges predicted squad for the 24-25 season and do a quick recap. You'll have the 4.5, 4.0 goalkeeper combo. I think you'll go for the Brentford option there, as you can see on screen. Pedro Porro seems like an absolute must. And I think, again, very rogue and specific pick. He's going to go for Munoz as well, based on my calculations. The two 4.0 defenders, again, could practically pick anyone, but I think they are the most likely ones. And a 4.5 million pound defender literally could be anyone, but I've just put Dan Burn in as a placeholder effectively. And look at that power midfield. You've got Jota and Salah, who I think you'll see value in both of them with those opening run of games. Eze, he had Mateta, of course, towards the end of last season, so he'll recognise that Palace had a great finish towards the 23-24 season. Gordon as the 7.5 million midfield option with Newcastle's generous run of games, and Carvalho as a player that he can flip with João Pedro, and they rotate remarkably well, actually, for the first 7 game weeks. So provided there aren't any X-Men's issues for Pedro and Carvalho, I think that could potentially work quite well. And then Isak, pretty much 100% owned among engaged managers. And then you've got Haaland, who I think you'll go for from the get-go as well. So there you have it. Those are my predictions for Fabio Borges' 24-25 FPL team ahead of game week 1. It might be the last ever prediction video I make for Fabio Borges in case his rank collapses altogether during 24-25. I hope not. I hope he bounces back with a bang. And at the same time, if you're watching this, Fabio, love your work, keep going, wishing you all the best. And I've also written a profile of Fabio Borges, and I'll put a link of that in the description below as well. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Was a team that I showed something that he would pick? Is it something that you would pick? And what are your thoughts overall? As always, if you're able to like, share, and subscribe, that will be greatly appreciated. Or if you want to buy me a coffee, the link is in the description below, or you should see it under this video as a pinned message. Take care, all the best for game week 1 and the season ahead.